UFC Fight Night, Gilbert Burns versus Sean Brady from the UFC Apex this Saturday night. When you look at this card, you're telling me this one shouldn't be in Brazil? I mean, seriously, like, look at the names on this card. I feel like this could sell out somewhere in Brazil. Gilbert Burns in the main event. You got Jessica Andrade and Natalia Silva in the co-main event, two Brazilians. Alessandro Costa is on the main card in a ranked flyweight matchup against Matt Schnell. And then you got Brazilians on the undercard too, Andrade Lima versus Felipe dos Santos. Gabriel Santos, you got Jacqueline Amorim. Like, could this card have not been in Brazil? I don't know. I mean, we need to get out of the UFC Apex. It's supposed to go under renovation in November. Thankfully, cards like this, I think, will get moved to sites like Brazil in the very near future. But we have got 13 fights on this card. And folks, if you haven't yet, though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. Tomorrow, we will have our Bellator Champions Series San Diego predictions with Alexander Chablis challenging for the lightweight championship against the undefeated Usman Nurmagomedov. Not MMA, but also we have NFL and college football predictions as well weekly on the channel. Last week we posted our college football predictions, and this week we will have them as well out on Tuesday. Wednesday we will have our week 1 NFL predictions, so stay on the lookout for predictions every single day. Again, today UFC, tomorrow Bellator, Tuesday college football, and Wednesday for week 1 of the NFL. All right, let's get into the first fight of these 13. Actually, but first, on to the Contender Series. Before we get onto this 13-fight card, we start things off in the Contender with Killian Salakid taking on Gage Young. I'm going to go with the Australian in Salakid to win the fight. He's fought better opponents in the regionals in Australia that he's fought in Eternal. Young has fought in FAC. That was the James Krause promotion in, the middle of the country, USA. I think it was the Kansas City area, if I'm not mistaken. I think Salakid's fought better guys. He's got a better grappling game, and I think he's got the skills to win this one. This is probably the closest fight on the entire card for me. I could easily see Young going out here and winning this fight, but again, just because we don't really know too much about these guys in Eternal personally, I don't know much about the guys in Eternal that Salakid has beat. Young really hasn't fought anybody all that great. Even his loss is to a 12-7, Bobby Lee. I'm taking Salakid to win the fight. I think he gets it done by submission in the second round. To our next one here, Yunzi Duben from Venezuela taking on Shannon Clark. Shannon Clark should win the fight. Coming off of a bulldog choke finish a couple months ago in LFA, she's just the better fighter. I don't know where they found Duben. She's fought nothing but 0-0 fighters in her professional mixed martial arts career so far. She has not fought a fighter with any experience in MMA. Where do you find these fighters? I don't know. I'm taking MMA Barbie Shannon Clark to win the fight by unanimous decision. I just don't think the fight is all that competitive. I think Shannon Clark's a true mixed martial arts fighter. Again, she's fought in promotions like LFA. Duben is fighting nothing but cans, nothing but 0-0 names. Give me Shannon Clark to win the fight by unanimous decision. We've got Austin Bashi taking on Dorian Ramos. Bashi's the guy the UFC wants to win this fight. He's undefeated. He's 12-0. He's been fighting in lights out MMA. I'm taking on Dorian Ramos, who's 30 years old, 8-2. Again, nothing all that impressive from Dorian Ramos. I think Bashi's way better. This is a guy who is 5'3" at 145, which is a little questionable, but a wrestling-heavy approach, a wrestling-heavy base, and he can go in there and get submissions. I think Bashi wins, and I think he dominates. 22 years old. That's the type of guy, those are the type of guys Dana White wants in the UFC. You'll, again, hear him say this all the time on the Contender. I'm not looking for 30-year-old contenders. He's looking for guys who are 20 years old. I think Bashi, looking for guys he can give 12K to show and 12K to win. I'm taking Bashi to win this fight by first round sub. I don't think the size plays too much of a factor because he's just going to go in and get a takedown, and win the fight on the ground. To our next one, Will Curie taking on Georgian Santos. I think this one's pretty simple. Will Curie should win the fight. This is a guy coming over from Cage Warriors, just won there 4 months ago. His last loss comes back a year and a half ago against Mick Stanton, who's a 10-7 fighter. Santos has not fought in a big regional promotion outside of Titan FC back 5 years ago, and Titan FC is known for being the most questionable half-major regional in the United States. Curie should win this fight, and he should dominate. I think he'll go out there and knock out Santos in the first round. On to our main event, Igor Cavalcanti taking on Seok Hon Ko. I'm taking Cavalcanti to win the fight. He is a -335 favorite. Now, Cavalcanti hasn't fought anybody all that great, I'll be honest with you. He's fought a lot of cans outside the UFC, outside the Contender, and for Seok Hyuk Ho, it's been kind of the same thing. He's been fighting in AFC, and really has not fought a guy with a very impressive resume. I think Cavalcanti, though, brings it. I think that's apparent in his fights. He goes out there and brings it and tries to get the finish. I think he will chase the finish against Seok Hyun Ko, and I think he's going to go out there and chase a knockout and get it in the first round. I think this is going to be an all-action type of fight. Someone's getting knocked out in this fight, and somebody's going to get that Dana White contract because, again, the stoppage will be impressive in this one. I think it will be Cavalcanti. I think he wins this fight by first-round knockout. Okay, done with the Contender Series, on it to the main card, or the prelims, and then on to the main card here at the UFC. We start things off here with Zygimantas Ramaska coming in from Lithuania, taking on Nathan Fletcher. Two guys who were on The Ultimate Fighter. This fight was scheduled for 2 weeks ago, and now here it is. I didn't know this fight was happening, actually, 2 weeks ago when I made my initial video for that Fight Night card with Cannonier and Kyle Borjayo. But we can talk about it now that it has been rescheduled. It's a close fight on paper for me. It really is. Because Nathan Fletcher's a guy who's 8-1. His only loss is when he got caught in, I believe it was the first round. We lost to Dominic Wooding. Was it not the first round? It was the third round, excuse me. It was the third round of the Cage Warriors Bantamweight Championship fight back in 2021. Dominic Wooding catches him with a head kick and beats him. And Dominic Wooding was a huge underdog going into that fight. And since then, for Wooding, he's only won one more fight. He defended the Cage Warriors Championship once, then lost it, then went to PFL Europe, and he's 0-2 in PFL Europe. So Wooding hasn't been all that great since knocking out Nathan Fletcher. Since Fletcher's lost to Wooding, he's gone back in Cage Warriors and won back-to-back fights, has not gotten back to the championship in Cage Warriors, but he has been successful over there. Nathan Fletcher's going to beat you with his ground game. That's, again, where he excels. And for Zygimantas Ramaska, the 27-year-old Lithuanian, he's got 2 losses on the record, 2018 and 2021. He is on a 3-fight winning streak. They're all by knockout. He fought in The Ultimate Fighter as well, and again was booked to fight Nathan Fletcher a couple weeks ago. I see a clash of styles in this fight, I'll be honest with you. I think you're picking this fight based on if you're picking Nathan Fletcher, if you think Nathan Fletcher can drag this fight down. You're picking Ramaska, basically, if you think he can keep the fight standing. I think Nathan Fletcher actually wins this fight. I think Ramaska, for the most part, is, I wouldn't say unproven, but you look at the guys he's fought and the guys he's lost to as well. And again, anything outside of 5 years is whatever, right? We don't really need to talk about that. But his loss to Vitolas Jalago, I probably butchered that, back in 2021. The guy's 10-2-2. He's now like 12-3-2, I believe. He won 3 fights after that against a 14-4-1 guy, a 25-7-2 guy, and a 10-10 guy. Yeah, I'm not too big on Ramaska. I think he's the better striker between him and Fletcher. Again, Fletcher's looked good in most of his fights. Again, he just got caught in the Wooding fight with a head kick. I think Fletcher's able to get this fight down. I think Fletcher's able to control the fight on the ground as well. I'm going to take the British fighter and Nathan Fletcher to go out here and beat Zygimantas Ramaska. I just think Fletcher's fought the better guys. I think Fletcher's been in the big spots before, and he has taken on better competition, meaning why I think he's going to be better than Ramaska in this fight. Again, I just think Fletcher's all around. I think the grappling on Fletcher is going to, weigh more than what damage Ramaska is able to do on the feet. So give me the British fighter Nathan Fletcher to win the opener by unanimous decision. To our next fight here, Andrade Petroski takes on Dylan Budka. Okay, this might be, I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I don't think it is. I think Andrade Petroski is just a better version of Dylan Budka. They kind of do the same thing, I'll be honest with you. Both, two guys who have wrestling bases. Again, Dylan Budka's 0-1 in the UFC. He fought Cesar Almeida. Again, when you looked at that fight, it was blatantly obvious what was going to happen. Again, the outcome I don't think was blatantly obvious, but the way the fight was going to be fought was blatantly obvious. Dylan Budka was going to try to wrestle Cesar Almeida, the kickboxer, and Cesar Almeida was going to try to keep the fight on the feet and knock out Dylan Budka. Well, Budka outgrappled him in the first round, put him on his back the entire first round. In the second, Cesar Almeida got back to the feet, and then he finished Dylan Budka, again, striking-wise. I thought the Budka signing was a little interesting going into the UFC. He won 3 fights in LFA, then lost a fight by split decision to Azamat Bokiev for the LFA Interim Middleweight Championship. Won a fight in SCS against a 2-4 guy, and then beat Chad Hankum on the Contender Series by decision, and then got his UFC contract. And it's not like the fight in the Contender was all that great. He just kind of out-grappled his opponent, and it wasn't all that decisive. I didn't understand the signing, I'll be honest with you. But now Budka is in there against Andrade Petroski, who hasn't looked great as of late. I know he came back, he bounced back, he won the fight against Josh Fremd in Denver a couple months ago, which is great. He went out there and out-wrestled Fremd like he was supposed to do. Again, it was not entertaining at all. Petroski had 13 minutes of ground control time in that fight. Before that, though, back-to-back losses. He got TKO'd by Jacob Malkoun because he shot him for a takedown, ran into Malkoun's hip, and just knocked himself out. That was weird. And then he lost to Michel Pereira before that. Again, expected. won a bunch of fights before that. I think he was undefeated in the UFC before the Pereira fight. Yeah, beat Michael Gilmore, Hu Young-jung, Nick Maximov, Wellington Turman, Gerald Mearshart. Petroski's striking still leaves a lot to be desired, but I do think it's like slightly, I think it is on par, honestly, with Dylan Budka. I don't think Budka's striking is all that great either. Budka just throws really hard and tries to knock you out. Petroski, to the same extent, is kind of that, but I just think Petroski's the better wrestler. I think he's going to go out there and just outgrind Dylan Budka to victory. Again, the way I see this fight on paper, is that they're kind of the same fighter. Andre Petroski's been in the UFC for a lot longer. He is 6-2 in the UFC. He's had 8 fights. He is the more experienced guy. He is the older guy, and he's the only guy in this fight that's won a fight so far in the UFC. I think Petroski wins. I personally don't understand the matchmaking. You got a guy who, I understand Petroski's 1-2 in his last 3 fights, but the guy's 6-2 as a whole in the UFC. It's probably just because they want to get Petroski a victory. Like, I remember the Ultimate Fighter season that Petroski was on, and the UFC was just dying to try to make this dude a star. They wanted this guy, Petroski, to be the winner of that show, and then he lost to who? Urbina? No, he lost to Brian Battle. And of course, they brought him back in on the Ultimate Fighter finale show. He beat Michael Gilmore, who was the most horrible guy on that show. So again, the UFC's been trying to push Petroski, I think, for a little bit. I don't know if that's what they're doing here entirely. To me, it sure feels like it. So I do think Petroski goes out here and wins this fight. And I think he dominates on the mat. Give me Andre Petroski by unanimous decision. As we move on to the strawweight division, Jacqueline Amorim takes on Vanessa Demopoulos. I don't know what Vanessa Demopoulos is paying the judges, but she keeps on getting the most questionable scorecards ever. I don't know what's going on. It's again, every time I pick a Vanessa Demopoulos fight, I think I have it won going into the cards, and then again, somehow, some way, Demopoulos gets the decision, right? The Kanako Marotte fight, she loses. She got controlled for 10 minutes on the ground in that fight. Marotte dominates the second and third rounds. Demopoulos wins the first, but rounds 2 and 3 of that fight, Kanako Marotte has 4 minutes of control time in each of the rounds, and they gave the scorecards to Demopoulos. And the striking numbers are even, by the way, so don't get on that, okay? Vanessa Demopoulos' win over Jin Yu Fry is a horrible scorecard. Jin Yu Fry, I thought, did more damage in that fight, and I thought she won the fight. I'll give Demopoulos the Maria Oliveira fight. That fight was close, but I think Demopoulos won it. And then the Emily Ducote fight is the worst one of them all. Okay, Emily Ducote completely dominates the second and third rounds of that fight. The first round, yes, is Vanessa Demopoulos' round. 2 and 3 is all Emily Ducote. Emily Ducote outstrikes Demopoulos the entire second and third rounds. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. So again, so far in Demopoulos' career, I think she's stolen 3 scorecards. The Jin Yu Fry fight, which is probably the closest out of all of them, the Kanako Marotte fight, and the Emily Ducote fight's the worst. You get her and Jacqueline Amorim now, who is a fighter who is 2-1 in the UFC. Now, her loss to Sam Hughes is really concerning me, because I think Sam Hughes is horrible, right? And now I think Victoria Dudakova is even worse. Don't get me started on Victoria Dudakova. But anyways, I think Sam Hughes is bad. Jacqueline Amorim has won back-to-back fights since. She beat Montserrat Canyejo, and then she had the win over Corey McKenna, who I forget who the referee was. Jacqueline Amorim gets the tap. The referee, Mike Beltran, stops the fight and says, no, keep going. And then Amorim just ends up getting the submission again. It was really weird. But Amorim is a very good grappler. That's what she does, obviously. Great BJJ. But in all fairness to Vanessa Demopoulos, that's kind of what she does too. But I have seen her get out-controlled by some good grapplers as well in the UFC, and I think Amorim is going to do the same exact thing. The thing for me is, can Amorim get Demopoulos in a submission and finish her? I don't know. Demopoulos is actually a pretty tough fighter to finish. She's never been finished in her entire professional mixed martial arts career. I think Amorim wins the fight by unanimous decision. And we also got to, Demopoulos is 35 in the strawweight division. It can be done, but it's just, again, she's about to turn 36. She's getting up there in age. I'm taking the way younger fighter, fighting at AETT, in Coconut Creek, Florida. She's 29 years old. Amorim is the better grappler. She's got the better BJJ. I don't know if she's going to be able to get a stoppage in this fight, but I think this fight will be very like the Kanako Marotte fight that Demopoulos had, just that Amorim will get the scorecards. It feels like a given almost in every Demopoulos fight that she wins one round, and it's usually the first round, and then somehow she steals either the second or the third on the cards. I think she might win this first round against Jacqueline Amorim, and I think it'll be, I think Amorim will be a pretty good live dog potentially going into that second round. I think just eventually her grappling is going to catch up to Demopoulos. I don't think Demopoulos can really hang down there with her. Amorim's got better traps. She's got better overall submissions that is going to give Demopoulos trouble, and I do think that Jacqueline Amorim wins this fight. I think she gets it done by unanimous decision. On the feet, maybe Demopoulos can outstrike her, but again, I think Amorim's just a lot better on the ground. So it's going to be Jacqueline Amorim to win the fight by unanimous decision. To our next one, we go on to the featherweight division. We have got Gabriel Santos versus Yizha, the road to UFC winner in Yizha, coming out of China, will be taking on Gabriel Santos, who is 0-2 in the UFC, 10-2 as a professional. This fight confuses me a little bit just because of the odds. And I understand Yizha is coming off road to UFC, and his only actual fight in the UFC is a loss to Young Lee, where he loses it by split decision. That was another road to UFC final that he lost by split decision. You go back and you look at that fight, I mean, Yizha controls the fight on the ground, but really does nothing in terms of the striking game, so Young Lee wins the fight. And that's where Yizha's probably going to try to win this fight against Santos, is on the ground. He can strike, sure, but again, he's going to go back to his wrestling base, and he's going to try to go back to the jiu-jitsu that he does have and the armbar that he did win the road to the UFC with in his last fight. For Gabriel Santos, again, this is a guy who's 0-2 in the UFC, losses to Lerone Murphy and David Onama, which aren't bad losses at all, but again, he is a pretty sizable favorite, minus 225 for being 0-2 in the UFC. But again, I will give it to Santos. These are two really tough guys to fight, especially in your first two fights in the UFC. Again, Santos is a primary grappler. That's where, again, this fight is going to be won and lost for both these guys. I don't think the striking is going to play too much of a factor because both these guys' striking games, again, it leaves some to be desired. I think Santos is actually a better striker, actually a way better striker than Yizha. Just so far in the UFC, again, he has gone back to his grappling, considering, again, the guys he has fought have been really good strikers in Lerone Murphy and David Onama. So, again, Santos has gone back and resulted to his grappling because of that. But again, you look at what he did outside of the UFC and LFA when he won the little LFA tournament. He won by knockout in the final of that, won before that in a main event in LFA by head kick in the second round. He's got the striking capability, and I think he is the way better striker between him and Yizha. And on the ground, I do think Santos is better too. I think Gabriel Santos wins the fight, and I think he gets it done by unanimous decision. I question sometimes, and we're going to talk about this later too, I question how good these road to the UFC guys are, because even the guys getting Yizha's beating, he's beating a 31-11-1 guy. Okay, again, this guy's fought a lot, but he's also lost now 12 times. He beat a guy who's 10-5-1, who's now 13-6-1. And then before that, he beat Kaiwan Lee in the finals, a guy who's 12-6. I just question a lot of the, just how good these guys truly are, especially since some of these guys in Asia fight all the time too. So they're fighting cans half the time, and then, then they're really active, but you just don't know how good their wins and losses are. I think Gabriel Santos wins the fight. I think he gets it done by decision. Again, I like him on the feet a lot in this one. Again, we saw what he did in LFA, getting those finishes on the feet. And on top of that, too, I do think his grappling is better than Yizha's as well. So give me Gabriel Santos to win the fight by unanimous decision. As we move on to the flyweights, Andrade Lima taking on Felipe dos Santos in the flyweight division. Again, two Brazilians, and Andrade Lima, you probably know him best for the guy who got bit in his first UFC fight. Shout out Igor Severino by losing the fight via biting Andrade Lima. But Lima is undefeated in the UFC, 2-0, coming off a victory in his last fight against Mitroposo over on that card in New Jersey, the Makhachev Poirier card. Don't know how that fight was a split decision. It was pretty bad. But Lima now gets Felipe dos Santos, a guy who made his UFC debut on relatively short notice, taking on Manel Kopp on a pay-per-view card. It was a fight that he lost, but, showed a pretty good account of himself, lost the fight by unanimous decision, one fight of the night, and after that came back and beat Victor Altamirano by split decision, a fight that Altamirano, again, resulted to grappling a lot. Dos Santos won it on the feet. Now you get Dos Santos and Andrade Lima in this fight. Again, Andrade Lima showed the striking in the Raposo fight. He was damaging Raposo a lot in that one. Dos Santos, not a bad striker at all in his own right, too, though. I think to a certain extent, I think De Lima's a little bit overrated, I'll be honest with you, just because, again, he got so much notoriety for getting bit in the Igor Severino fight, but that fight was relatively close before that happened. Again, you can make the case Severino was winning the fight up until that point, and Andre Lima was the one grabbing the fence a lot. I think that's kind of what the built-up frustration and anger out of Igor Severino was by biting Lima, which, again, you can't do, but that was because, again, Lima was grabbing the fence a lot. The referee Tognoni wasn't really giving him too many warnings for it. And again, it was, stopping Severino from getting takedowns in that fight. Again, Lima got made out to be a hero for just getting bit, and Dana White again promoted him a lot, but how good is Lima really? He beat Mitch Raposo on relatively short notice, Raposo's first fight in the UFC, and again, he was in a little bit of trouble in that third round. I think Felipe Dos Santos is actually better here, considering there is no threat of the takedown for Dos Santos in this fight. This is a guy who went, again, strike for strike, blow for blow with a very credible striker in Manel Kape. We're talking about Felipe Dos Santos here. I think he's able to go out there and outstrike Andre Lima. I think there's a lot of very good underdogs in this card, and this is one of them here. I really like Felipe Dos Santos to go out here and win this fight. I just think as a whole, he's the better striker. On the ground, this fight's probably not going to go down there, so I just think Dos Santos is quicker. He's able to exchange, and he's been in some wars with a guy like Manel Kape, or I guess it's only one fight, but still, he was able to go strike for strike with Manel Kape. I think he's able to do it with Andre Lima in this fight, and I think he's going to see a lot of success in doing so. Just simply put, I think Felipe Dos Santos is the better striker. I think he goes out here and wins this fight by unanimous decision. I just think Lima gets a little too much respect because of that fight against Severino, because people know who he is now. And yeah, he beat Mitch Raposo, but again, it wasn't the best victory over Mitch Raposo. I think Dos Santos wins the fight, and I think he gets it by unanimous decision. Let's move on to our next one here. The biggest favorite on the card by far. He's a minus 1,800 favorite. Okay, I'm seeing minus 2,500 now on Tapology. There's a very good chance Isaac Dulgarian is going to be the biggest favorite in UFC history in this fight with Brandon Marotte. It might surpass Peyton Talbot's fight with Yanis Gamori. But yeah, you got Dulgarian and Brandon Marotte, and yeah, I don't understand why this fight's happening. It's ridiculous. Isaac Dulgarian's going to win the fight by first round knockout, and it is pretty simple. Marotte's really bad. I think he is. I don't know. Again, I don't know where the UFC finds some of these guys sometimes. He was fighting in Combat Zone prior to making the UFC. He had won 3 in a row against 8-4, 3-1, and 11-20. And you saw what happened in the Terrence McKinney fight. I like Terrence McKinney a lot, but, recently, or, prior to recently in his UFC career, he just beat up on a lot of guys making their UFC debut, a lot of guys who probably should have been in the UFC. Looking at Eric Gonzalez, I believe his name was, as well. Brandon Marotte's going to get destroyed in this fight, though. Again, Terrence McKinney knocked him out in 20 seconds with the knee. Isaac Dulgarian hits very hard. He swings hard. He swings big. I think something very similar happens in this fight with him and Marotte. Again, I don't know what Brandon Marotte does. Brandon Marotte does all that well. He was coined a striker going into the UFC. He has 1 knockout victory since 2018. I don't know why he's in the UFC. Dulgarian, again, had a close fight with C-Rod in his last fight. The Christian Rodriguez fight was very close. Say what you want about the scorecards, it is what it is. Go back and watch his Francis Marshall fight where he goes in there and dominates Francis Marshall back in 2023. He got his contract on Dana White looking for a fight, a win over TJ Britton, a guy who was 7-2 at the time, a guy who I thought the UFC was really looking at, and the reason why, I don't think they weren't looking at him, but they were looking at him as a big test for Dulgarian in that fight. TJ Britton was a guy at the time who was like 38 years old. He was 7-1. It was a pretty good test for Dulgarian, and Dulgarian went out there and knocked him out. You get Marotte and Dulgarian here, though, and this fight's not going to be competitive. Again, you saw what Dulgarian did to Francis Marshall in that fight. He took him down and just elbowed the hell out of him on the ground. I think you get something very similar in this fight here. It's either going to be a takedown and then, again, big ground and pound punches to Marotte, or it's just going to be a big shot that Dulgarian puts him out with on the feet. Either way, give me Isaac Dulgarian to absolutely dominate this fight. The fight should not be competitive. Brandon Marotte is just not very good. Some of these New England cartel guys just aren't that great. Give me Dulgarian to win the fight by first round knockout. We go on to our next one in the light heavyweight division. We've got Ryan Spann taking on Ovince St. Preux. Yes, Ovince St. Preux is still fighting in the UFC. This is the featured prelim. OSP's actually coming off of a win, believe it or not. If you remember that fight against Kennedy Nzechukwu, I don't know why that fight was a split decision, but Nzechukwu was just so bad in that fight. It was like annoying watching the fight, how bad Nzechukwu was. Now you get OSP and Ryan Superman Spann. I think OSP's really outmatched in this fight, I'll be honest with you. He's 41 years old. He did look decent in the Nzejuku fight, but I am willing to make the case that was more Nzejuku wasn't looking very good rather than OSP looking great. OSP does stun him and knock him down in the third round, and arguably wins every single round of that fight. But still, I don't think OSP is very good at 41 years old. I understand Ryan Spann's lost 3 fights in a row. This is the fight they get Ryan Spann back on track with. Ryan Spann still hits very hard. He has not won a fight since 2022 where he knocked out Dominic Reyes. But again, that fight alone should kind of show you that's what Ryan Spann is capable of doing in there. A loss to Nikita Krylov after that, who has been confirmed not dead. He is fighting later this year. I'm happy Nikita Krylov's still alive. Loses to Anthony Smith after that in a rematch, and then loses a fight where he gets knocked out against Bogdan Guskov. Now, that fight was only in April. It's been, it's been quite a bit of time. But now you get him in OSP. I don't think OSP is going to go out there and, knock him out like crazy. Because again, OSP doesn't have a knockout win since 2020 where he knocked out Alonzo Menefield. I think Ryan Spann can win this fight. I don't think he's going to get chinned. Yeah, Guskov, pressured him and cornered him and knocked him out on that Nicolau Perez card in April of this year. And it hasn't been that much time since then. It's been, about 4 months. But I think Ryan Spann can go out here and win this fight. All around, he just hits harder. He's the better striker. And I don't trust a 41-year-old Ovince St. Preux to win a fight in the UFC. And yes, he did it. He did it in his last fight against Kenny Nzejuku. But there's a big difference going from Kenny Nzejuku to Ryan Spann. Ryan Spann is still a top 15 guy, believe it or not. I would say he is. He still hits very hard, and he's just the all-around better striker. So give me Ovince St. Preux to lose. Ryan Spann should be able to chin him and knock him out in the first round. Ryan Superman Spann with the victory. To our next one, Rongzhu, the winner of the Road to the UFC, comes back into the UFC for his second stint, and he's going to take on Chris Padilla. Rongzhu is a pretty decent favorite in this fight, which really surprises me. Considering Rongzhu's first, stint in the UFC, I don't think it was bad. I don't really know why they cut him. He was only 1-2. They give some of these guys 4 chances to win one fight. I think it was because he missed weight in back-to-back fights. Because he was fighting at, 155. He's back at 155. So, yeah, whatever. He weighed in at 160 in his last fight against Bahamondes, a fight he lost. But Rongzhu since comes back, wins a fight on UAE Warriors, wins 3 in a row in the road to the UFC, and now he's back taking on Chris Padilla. Rongzhu, it's still a case. This is still the case, by the way, in his fights in the road to the UFC as well. What gets him every time? Very good grapplers. Very good grapplers try to go in there and they try to wrestle him. Or really anybody tries to do that. And that's, again, why Rongzhu isn't, I wouldn't say on that next level, because I don't think Rongzhu is ever going to get to that next level. Even though I believe this guy's somewhat young, right? He's only like 25. He's 24 years old and his record's 25-5. I don't know. This is incredible. But Rongzhu has always been beat, especially in the UFC, and where guys have given him trouble in the road to UFC has been with his grappling. Well, Chris Padilla can do exactly just that. You go back, you rewatch Chris Padilla's first fight in the UFC, where he beats James Lontop. He smits him in the first round. Again, Lontop was a huge favorite going into that one. Padilla was a guy who was well known around the regional scene, but a guy that I didn't really think was ever going to get a contract in the UFC. When they signed him, I was surprised, I'll be honest with you. But he's 28 years old, fighting out of Gardena, California. He gets the shot. He beats Lontop. He takes him down 3 times in 4 minutes, eventually gets the submission. And now you give him a guy who's had trouble with good grapplers in the UFC before. I'm talking about, Ignacio Bahamondes is not a great grappler, but Rongzhu shoots the takedown, and Bahamondes cinches up a guillotine and submits him. And you look at what Rongzhu has done on the road to the UFC. Yes, he did win his last fight by rear naked choke, but still, Shin Haraguchi went in there and, actively pursued the takedown. And again, Rongzhu just got him on the ground. He switched, he switched positions, he switched him on the ground, and he reversed him, and he got the back and submitted Shin Haraguchi in that fight. I think Chris Padilla wins. I'm surprised, again, Rongzhu is a minus 285 favorite. This is probably one of the bigger underdogs I'm ever going to, well, not ever, but like, again, I normally stay away from plus 200 underdogs, but I'm going to take the plus 230 dog here in Chris Padilla. I think Padilla finds a way to a submission in this fight. I think he gets it done in the second round. I still think Rongzhu is relatively green. I think Rongzhu still has trouble with grapplers, and once again, he is back now in the UFC. He's not taking on unproven guys like we just talked about in the road to the UFC with Yizha. The same thing applies to Rongzhu, okay? It's still relatively unproven guys. Chris Padilla has gone there. He's beat a guy like James Lontop in the UFC. Rongzhu's only win in the UFC is Brandon Jenkins. I think Padilla wins. Give me Taco to go out there and win the fight by second round sub. I think the grappling is where this fight is won and lost, and I think Padilla gets it done. Chris Padilla by second round submission. Someone's getting knocked out now in the lightweight division. We've got Trevor Peek versus Yanal Ashmouz. Again, someone will get knocked out. It's just a matter of when and who it's going to be. Because both these guys, again, swing for the fences, especially Trevor Peek. But I really like the fight here. Yanal Ashmouz 1-1 in the UFC. Trevor Peek 2-2 in the UFC. Ashmouz is coming off of his loss in his last fight to Chris Duncan. Really weird fight because Ashmouz looked great in his first UFC fight, right? Surprises a lot of people, knocks out Sam Patterson, comes back, loses to Chris Duncan in a fight where Duncan just kind of beats him up for 25 minutes. And now Yanal Ashmouz comes back and gets Trevor Peek, who's 2-2, went over Eric Gonzalez in his first fight. Gonzalez is one of the guys that we talked about, Terrence McKinney. Probably should have never been in the UFC in the first place. Peek then loses to Shepe Mariscal, beats Muhammad Yahya, who's horrible, and then loses to Charlie Campbell in his last fight by unanimous decision. Charlie Campbell, I really don't know how good Campbell is. He's 2-0 in the UFC with wins over Alex Reyes and Trevor Peek. And he lost in the contender to Chris Duncan. I don't know how good Charlie Campbell really is. Like, I'll be honest with you, I just don't know how good he is. But Peek's 2-2. He's beat two guys who aren't very good. Muhammad Yahya is absolutely god-awful. You saw that in his last fight with Kyle Fernandez. Yanal Ashmouz, I don't know how good this guy truly is as well. Because, yeah, he beat Sam Patterson, but he just caught him early in the fight, right? I mean, good win, don't get me wrong. Patterson's won back-to-back fights since then. But Ashmouz just caught him early in the fight. And the Chris Duncan fight, that's more telling of how Yanal Ashmouz truly fights. Because Chris Duncan just beat him up for 15 minutes. He was the aggressor. He was pushing the pace. Again, he was working forward. Oh, I think Trevor Peek actually wins this one. When I was looking over this card earlier, I was thinking I was going to take Yanal Ashmouz, but I actually think I'm going to take Trevor Peek, and I'm going to take Peek to win this fight by decision. I don't think he gets the knockout here, and again, Trevor Peek is going to chase it 100%. That's what he does, but he did do that in the Muhammad Yahya fight, and he didn't end up getting the finish. He also went to his wrestling some in that fight as well. Could we see that in this fight with Ashmouz? 100% as well, because Chris Duncan was successful getting takedowns on Yanal Ashmouz too. So I think that's there for Trevor Peek as well. I just don't know, again, how good Yanal Ashmouz it truly is. Because, yes, he looked very good in that first fight against Sam Patterson. He was a pretty sizable dog in that fight. He went in there. He went into the UK and knocked out Sam Patterson. It was a huge upset victory. But, yes, at the same time, he just caught him. So how good is this guy really? We are going to really find out in this fight. Because, yes, the Chris Duncan fight said, all right, he's not who we thought he was. Now, again, here's another fight for him in the UFC against a guy in Trevor Peek who, at the same time, hasn't really beat a great UFC fighter yet. He's beat two guys who I'm assuming, again, Yahya is no longer going to be in the UFC after that Fernandez fight. Maybe they give him another fight in Abu Dhabi. They probably will, because he's the only fighter from the UAE in the UFC. But Peek's fought guys who aren't very good. I don't know. We're going to find out a lot of things about both these guys here. Everything that I've seen so far, I think favors a Trevor Peek victory. I think he goes out there and wins the fight by unanimous decision. Give me Trevor Peek to go out there and get the dub. To the flyweight division, Matt Schnell takes on Alessandro Costa. Things are rough, I think, for Matt Schnell. Things are really rough for this guy. His chin is gone. His chin is absolutely gone. You saw Steve Ursak's a good striker, but it's been apparent over Matt Schnell's career that he just can't take a punch anymore. I think personally it's a result of him fighting too quickly. The turnaround that I thought of was when he beat Sumadarji, a fight that somehow he won. Again, he somehow wrestled that fight out the jaws of defeat. He won it. he was getting bruised up, battered in that fight, knocked down twice, went in there, eventually got the triangle choke and won, comeback of the year. But then he comes back only like 4 months later, fights Mateus Nicolau, and Mateus Nicolau knocks him out in the second, and then comes back 3 to 4 months later and fights Steve Erceg. Now, it's been 6 months, which that is about the amount of time that you want to see after a knockout, but that's the minimum. And that's the minimum for a guy in Matt Schnell who has been knocked out time in and time out in the UFC. Alexandre Pantoja knocked him out back in 2019. Again, Nicolau did it. Erceg just did it. I think Alessandro Costa is going to do the same exact thing. Personally, that's what I think is going to happen here. I think Costa knocks him out. I think he gets it done in the second round. Matt Schnell will be competitive in this fight. He is competitive in a lot of fights. But where he loses again is with his chin. He simply just can't take a punch. And Alessandro Costa does hit hard. Again, he knocked out Kevin Borjas in his last fight, knocked him down, eventually got the finish down on the ground. He finished Jimmy Flick, knocked him down as well. Had a loss to Steve Erceg, but again, Steve Erceg, even with his loss to Kai Kara France, Steve Erceg's still a top 10 guy. Costa's other loss is Amir Albazi. Again, I understand his wins are not, they're not going to blow you away, Borjas and Flick, but still, the losses are really good losses. And 2 fights that, Albazi finished him in the 3rd round, but then he went the distance with Erceg in Madison Square Garden. I like Costa a lot to win this fight. He's got all the knockout capability in the world. That's what he was able to do. That's how he was successful in Lux, and that's how he won the flyweight championship in Lux, was via the knockout. I think he does it against Matt Schnell here, and I think he knocks him out in the second. Again, how does Matt Schnell win this fight? I don't know. I really don't know. Like, regardless of Schnell's chin or not, this is just a tough fight for him because Costa's a really good grappler too. So Schnell can't even go down there. Costa's got him beat on the ground. He's got him beat in striking, and he's got him beat in terms of just having a solid chin too. So again, this is just a very tough fight for Schnell. In all fairness, a lot of fights I think at flyweight are just tough fights for Schnell because again, he just can't take a punch. This guy's won 1 fight in his last 5. I'm taking Alessandro Costa to win the fight by second round TKO. Matt Schnell, if he wants to continue his UFC career, I think should take seriously a full year off and come back and fight a guy coming off the Contender Series. That's personally what I think he should do. I think he needs a complete reset. Don't fight these top 10 guys that are going to go out there and knock you out. Fight a primary grappler in your next fight, coming off the Contender. It's your way to build yourself back up. That's what I'd like to see out of Schnell. Will it happen? Probably not. He'll probably come back and fight in like 4 months, get knocked out, and then go to the PFL. Or actually, no, they don't have a flyweight division. And then he'll go to Ryzen. That'd be horrible for him. I don't know. We'll see. Give me Alessandro Costa, though, by second round TKO. Again, Schnell's chin's gone. That's really all you need to know. And by the way, Costa is the better striker, better grappler, too. So, again, I don't know where Schnell gets this fight. All right, to our featured bout here. We have got Steve Garcia taking on Kyle Nelson, a fight that was originally supposed to be Kyle Nelson versus Calvin Kattar, which I thought was a huge step down in competition for Kattar, but a fight that honestly I thought was kind of needed for Kattar. Not like he has to have a fight like that, but just a fight that he would go out there and definitely win. Now you get Kyle Nelson against Steve Garcia, a guy coming off a co-main event victory in July on that Lemos Vigenci Hoba card where he knocked out Sungwoo Choi in the first round. He's on a 4-fight knockout streak. And again, at one point in time, I didn't think Steve Garcia was very good. It was after that Mahashet loss where he got knocked out in the first round. But other than that, Steve Garcia's won 4 in a row. And again, I'm a believer now. I'm a believer of the mean machine Steve Garcia. I think he's got a really good striking game. I think he's got a lot of power, especially for 145 pounds. And yeah, Kyle Nelson's a guy who has won 3 in a row as well. Blake Bilder, Fernando Padilla, and then a win over Bill Algeo in his last fight, that got stopped way too early. But you got to give credit to Kyle Nelson. Again, there was a reason, Bill Algeo was put in that situation to even warrant a discussion of it being an early stoppage because of the damage Kyle Nelson was able to do early in that fight in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And Kyle Nelson, again, another guy who surprised me, because at one point in time, I didn't think Kyle Nelson was very good either. This guy was, 1-4 in the UFC, had a draw against Doo Ho Choi, comes back, beats Blake Bilder, and then he puts together 2 straight wins, and now look at him, he's fighting Steve Garcia in a featured bout on a fight night card. I understand, again, the fight night cards sometimes aren't the greatest, but now you get Nelson and Steve Garcia. I just think Steve Garcia is a lot better, though, than Kyle Nelson. Nelson, shocked me a lot with that Bill Algeo performance, don't get me wrong. But Steve Garcia has been melting guys in there, man. Again, I will tell you, I am a believer in the mean machine, Steve Garcia. I really like the striking game at this point. You saw what he did to melt Costa. Again, completely drowned him, finished him in the second round. Sungwoo Choi knocked him out in the first. Shailan Nordembeka, after getting knocked down earlier in the fight, Steve Garcia comes back and gets a knockdown of his own and ends up winning the fight and knocking out Shailan Nordembeka. Chase Hooper, this is 2022 Chase Hooper, so it's not the same guy as of right now, and Hooper, who's actually been kind of melting guys, but still, knocking down Chase Hooper 3 times in the span of 92 seconds is a feat. It's a knockdown every 30 seconds, essentially. I know the math doesn't really work out to that because it really didn't happen every 30 seconds, but still, again, 3 knockdowns in 92 seconds is a big deal, and that's what Steve Garcia did to Chase Hooper in that fight. I really like Steve Garcia in this one. I think Kyle Nelson's striking does leave a little bit to be desired. Even though, again, he has won him fights recently, but now he gets a true step up in competition because Steve Garcia has been firing on all cylinders. He's a Jackson Wink guy, not one of the few guys who's finding a lot of success currently at Jackson Wink in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Just as of late, that gym hasn't really performed all that great. But I do think Steve Garcia finds a knockout in this one. I don't really trust in Kyle Nelson all that much to go out here and outstrike Garcia because that's, again, where this fight will play out most likely. It will be on the feet. I think Garcia goes in there and gets the knockout and gets the win. Give me the mean machine Steve Garcia to go out there and get a first-round knockout victory over Kyle Nelson. Maybe the biggest of his career. He is coming off a co-main event in his last fight, but I think it's a guy the UFC can kind of get behind too. That'd be 5 straight knockout victories for Steve Garcia. Believe it or not, I'd say give him a shot into the top 15 next. Hey, Kyle Nelson was booked against Calvin Kattar. Let's do Steve Garcia and Calvin Kattar. That is, I know, a tough fight for Kattar, just considering, again, he's coming off an Aljo fight where he was off a long layoff. But hell, give me Garcia and Calvin Kattar next. I think that fight would slap. And I think it'd be a real good test for Kattar at this point to see truly where he is in his career after the injury and after that beatdown he took from Aljamain Sterling at UFC 300. So that's the fight I'd like to see next. It was supposed to go to Kyle Nelson. Let's give it to Steve Garcia. Co-main event spot in the women's flyweight division, we've got Jessica Andrade taking on Natalia Silva. Again, it's weird that this is not a bad co-main event. Again, this fight card feels like it should be in front of a crowd. But, you know, you got to save money somehow. It's not like we're only paying the fighters $12K to show, $12K to win all the time, and never upping the bonuses ever again either. But Jessica Andrade, 26-12 professional record. She's got 27 fights in the UFC. This will be her 28th walk into the UFC octagon, and she gets a very good, highly touted prospect in Natalia Silva. I think very highly in Natalia Silva. I think she's pretty good. Again, undefeated in the UFC, 5-0. Her striking game has been on point. And Jessica Andrade, even though she is coming off back-to-back victories over Mackenzie Dern and Marina Rodriguez, Natalia Silva is one of these fighters in this flyweight division who is climbing the ranks very quickly, and I think she's a fighter who's going to fight for a world championship someday. That's how good I think Natalia Silva is, and this is the fight where everyone's going to find out how good Natalia Silva truly is. She's ranked 8th in the weight class, Andrade is 6th. Again, we've talked about Blanchfield, Fierro, Barber as the young up-and-coming fighters of this women's 125 division, which, by the way, is log-jammed at the top because we have waited a whole year for Shevchenko and Grasso just to fight one more time. It is what it is. Fierro should be getting the next shot. The winner of Grasso-Shevchenko better be able to turn that fight around very quickly to, like, February so the division doesn't keep getting halted at the top all the time. But Natalia Silva, again, should be regarded as one of these next up-and-coming fighters, like, again, the fighters we previously mentioned. Now, I have a fight for Natalia Silva that I like to see next, or the winner of this fight I'd like to see next, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Jessica Andrade has won back-to-back fights against Marina Rodriguez and Mackenzie Dern, right? Okay, Marina Rodriguez is not the fighter she once was, and Mackenzie Dern, I don't think is very good at fighting. I just don't think she is. I thought she lost to Lupi Godinez. I think Mackenzie Dern kind of sucks at this point. I think Amanda Hebus is going to beat Mackenzie Dern in their rematch in Tampa later this year in December. So again, Andrade did what she was supposed to do to Mackenzie Dern. Marina Rodriguez, actually, you know, she was a huge underdog in that fight, wasn't she? I think actually I picked Mackenzie Dern to win that fight. I did. That's my fault. That's the fight where I realized how bad Mackenzie Dern was. I'm not going to lie. Even though she's always been shaky, but that was the fight I kind of just turned on Mackenzie Dern. It's like, all right, she's just not good. Andrade beats Rodriguez, though. I thought that was a good scorecard. I picked Andrade to win the fight. But I just think Natalia Silva is a better striker than Jessica Andrade at this point. Natalia Silva's good. She's good. She has power as well. Andrade is... you know, she's 5'1", 125 pounds. It is what it is. Silva's going to be the bigger fighter. She's going to have a bigger reach advantage as well. She's going to have about a 4-inch reach advantage on Jessica Andrade. I just think Silva's able to use her kicks effectively in this fight. I think she's able to maintain distance effectively in this fight. I think she's able to touch up Andrade for 15 minutes in this fight. I'm taking Natalia Silva to win the fight by decision. Again, you look at Andrade's little losing streak, Erin Blanchfield, Yan Xiaonan, and Tatiana Suarez. Again, really good fighters, but I'm willing to put Natalia Silva kind of in that category now of really good up-and-coming fighters. Like, honestly, all three of those fighters, at the time of them fighting Jessica Andrade, that's what they kind of all were. Again, Blanchfield, that was her first UFC main event. Yan Xiaonan, that was the fight that she had before she got the title shot. And Tatiana Suarez, knock on wood, that's the fight that she just had to get a title shot next. I don't know where Tatiana Suarez is. I've only seen her with Patchy Mix at Bellator and PFL fights. Is she going to fight Zhang Weili? I don't know. Probably not, and we're going to get stuck with the Vina Jandiroba Zhang Weili title fight in December. I don't know, man. I don't know. But I think Natalia Silva beats Andrade. Again, Andrade is not a horrible striker. She's not, but she's going to wing big shots. I don't think she's going to be able to hit Silva all that much. I think Silva maintains distance. I think she's really good with her kicks, and I think she's able to go out there and just out-touch Andrade on the outside. And I don't want to say point fight her way to victory, but I think she's going to fight this fight somewhat strategically, not get in the way of any big blows that Andrade does throw, because that's what she does. I think Silva fights this fight smart, stays on the outside, uses her jab effectively, uses her leg kicks, uses her body kicks. I think Natalia Silva gets it done by unanimous decision. So give me Silva to win in the co-main event, her biggest win yet over Jessica Andrade. And the fight I want to see next for Natalia Silva is Maycee Barber. Barber's in the top 5. There you go. You get a title challenger out the winner of that fight. Erin Blanchfield, Rose Namajunas winner, should not be getting a title shot. I don't care. The winner of Natalia Silva and Maycee Barber should be getting a title shot. The winner of Namajunas Blanchfield should be fighting the loser of Grasso Shevchenko. But Natalia Silva and Maycee Barber is a true #1 contenders fight. Obviously, again, Fiorot should be fighting the winner of Shevchenko Grasso. And then again, the loser of Shevchenko Grasso should fight the winner of Namajunas versus Blanchfield. And the winner of Natalia Silva, Maycee Barber, should be fighting the winner of Manon Fiorot and the winner of Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso. I know that was way too convoluted, and it probably shouldn't have been that convoluted, but that's kind of just how I want to see the weight class going forward here. I think in this fight, personally, though, again, Natalia Silva beats Jessica Andrade, and I'd really like to see her in a fight with Maycee Barber. I think that's the fight that will dictate, I think, the next #1 contender in this weight class. Potential champion? We'll see. But I like Natalia Silva to win this fight in her biggest fight to date in a co-main event against Jessica Andrade. To our main event. In the welterweight division, Durinho, Gilbert Burns takes on Sean Brady. Gilbert Burns is 38 years old, coming off a loss to Jack Della Maddalena. And don't get me wrong, again, Gilbert Burns only fights really good guys. Now he gets Sean Brady, who is, 7 years younger. He's coming off a Kelvin Gastelum win by Kimura. And his only loss, Sean Brady, is to the champion Belal Muhammad. But it was a fight where Belal Muhammad knocked him out. He TKO'd him. And don't get me wrong, Belal's striking is a lot better than I thought it was. Again, I was so impressed, and I still am very impressed with Belal Muhammad in his victory over Leon Edwards. Guys, I'll say right now, I think Belal Muhammad beats Shavkat Rakhmonov, okay? And we will get to that fight if that fight is scheduled. I'd assume it'd be scheduled. I don't want to see Usman versus Belal. Why is Usman getting a title shot after losing 3 straight fights? I mean, come on. It should be Shavkat Rakhmonov. I mean, if we're giving Usman a title shot, you might as well give Colby another title shot, right? I mean, like, what are we doing? Which I could actually see that happening. I'm not gonna lie. I could see Colby and Belal being booked. I don't think it should. Just like I don't think Usman should be getting the title shot. It should be Shavkat or Jack Della. Jack Della, honestly, has fought more recently than Shavkat. He has a better last win than Shavkat. Shavkat's last win's Wonder Boy. And people were clowning Colby Covington for calling out Wonder Boy after he lost to Leon Edwards. Now, again, I thought it was a horrible call out too, but that is Shavkat's last win and the fight that will likely get Shavkat a world title fight, right? So, I don't know. Sean Brady versus Gilbert Burns. Though, again, Brady's only loss is to Belal Muhammad. Gilbert Burns has lost 2 in a row, Belal Muhammad and Jack Della Maddalena, in a fight against Jack Della where Gilbert Burns took a lot of damage. He got knocked out in that 3rd round, that brutal knee that put him down, and now you get a fight here in the main event for Gilbert Burns. It has, though, been 6 months since that loss to Jack Della Maddalena. That's enough time for the chin to heal. Burns and Brady's an interesting fight, though, because I don't think Sean Brady's able to go out there and outstrike Gilbert Burns. I don't think anybody's expecting that, obviously, right? I don't think Sean Brady's able to outgrapple Gilbert Burns. I'm serious. I don't think he's able to. Burns has got a pretty good striking game. I understand Jack Della knocked him out. So I think we're good there. And in terms of the grappling, again, I understand Brady's good down there, but Gilbert Burns is a guy who's never been submitted before. He's never really just been beat on the ground. Belal Muhammad had to outstrike Gilbert Burns, and Burns was hurt going to that fight. But really, Khamzat Chimaev was not able to out-grapple and out-wrestle Gilbert Burns to the point where he was able to get a finish. Damian Maia was not able to do that as well. Nobody has been able to out-grapple and out-wrestle Gilbert Burns to victory. No one's been able to submit him, and no one's been able to lay on him and win a fight that way. So I don't think Sean Brady's the first guy to do that, I'll be honest with you. So, okay. You look at the striking between these two guys. And yeah, you can say, yeah, Gilbert Burns has lost his 2 fights striking against Della Maddalena and Belal Muhammad. But again, those 2 guys are very good. And yeah, you can make the case for what Sean Brady's only loss is to Belal Muhammad. But Belal Muhammad finished Sean Brady. It's the only guy Belal Muhammad has finished on the feet in the UFC, I believe. I could be mistaken, but I believe it is. And Gilbert Burns went 25 minutes with the champion on the feet. I think Gilbert Burns, I understand he's 38 years old. But being old doesn't make your grappling that worse. It doesn't. It makes your striking worse and your chin worse. But I don't think Sean Brady's going to knock out Gilbert Burns. That's just not what Sean Brady does. Does Sean Brady have a knockout victory? He does. But the last time that happened, it was in CFFC back in 2019 for the CFFC Welterweight Championship in the 4th round. Sean Brady doesn't knock anybody out. So do we really think Sean Brady out-wrestles Gilbert Burns for 25 minutes? Because he's not going to submit Gilbert Burns. So do you think that Sean Brady can just go out there and put pressure on Burns, lay on Burns, and keep top positioning? Personally, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think Gilbert Burns wins this fight. I think he'll eventually win it on the feet. Again, Burns' striking has been iffy recently. But this is the fight where he gets back on the winning track. I think Gilbert Burns TKOs Sean Brady in the 3rd round. I think eventually, again, he's just going to find that shot. I think it's going to be an accumulation of damage for Gilbert Burns in this fight. And I think Sean Brady's being a little bit overrated going into this one. Yeah, he's coming off a win, but he's coming off a win over Kelvin Gastelum. And Kelvin Gastelum, at this point of his career, is very shaky. He just is. He has 2 wins in the last 3-4 years, and it's Chris Curtis and Daniel Rodriguez. I understand Kelvin Gastelum fights nothing but tough fights, but still, I think Gilbert Burns, even at the age of 38, goes out there and beats Sean Brady. I wouldn't say it's a levels fight, because that's kind of how Belal Muhammad versus Sean Brady was. I don't think it's a levels fight, but I just think Gilbert Burns has the skills to beat Sean Brady, and on paper, I think it's a horrible matchup for Sean Brady because, again, nobody out-grapples Gilbert Burns. Nobody submits Gilbert Burns. I don't think Sean Brady's good enough to be the first guy to do that. If Khamzat Chimaev, I understand it was an old Damian Maia, but still, if Damian Maia is not able to do that, and Kamaru Usman and Belal Muhammad don't do that, Sean Brady's not doing the same thing, and Sean Brady cannot compete against Gilbert Burns on the feet like Khamzat, Usman, and Belal Muhammad can. So I don't think Sean Brady's as good as Gilbert Burns, and I don't think he's as good as the guys Gilbert Burns has lost to. So give me Dorino to go out here and pick up the victory over Sean Brady in the main event. We are taking Gilbert Burns to take this one by 3rd round TKO. Eventually, he's going to put enough damage into Brady to the point where he gets the finish. So, folks, thank you for watching our UFC Fight Night predictions between Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady in the main event. If you haven't yet, though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to join us tomorrow for our Bellator Champion Series San Diego predictions, Tuesday for College Football Week 2 predictions, and on Wednesday for Week 1 of the NFL predictions as well. Folks, thank you all for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video, and make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Folks, thank you all for watching, and Mamba forever.